Welcome to week 4 of our SUEDEsays travel bag sew along. I am excited because this is our sewing finish line. This week's focus will be attaching our piping and zippers, attaching our handles, sewing up that long strappy handle, and finally sewing and attaching all of our bag sections, finishing one amazing travel bag. Designed by Suede, sewn by us. Let's get started. Let's start by attaching our piping to our front and back sections. You will notice these are steps number 7 and number 16 in our instruction sheet. Here are my tips for doing this. We're ready to put our piping on. Now, as you see, I have the front part of my bag. And what we do to this, we're going to also do piping to our back part of our bag. If you also notice, I do have it the front side up. And that is exactly how we want to sew on our piping. You will also note that we do have a 5/8 seam allowance. And so, depending on the piping that you purchased, or if you made piping, be aware of where your cording is and how big or how wide that flange is. This is the packaged piping, and it is maybe 3/8 of an inch. So given that, we need to measure up 5/8 from the edge of our bag and have that cording, that stitching line for that cording right up against there. We want that cording to be either on our 5/8 seam allowance or a little bit over. And when I say a little bit, I'm talking a smidge. So when you're putting this piping on, if you choose to use the package piping, you need just to make sure you're aware at every place that you're at of 5/8 with that cording. Now I got some home deck piping, or welting. Actually in the home deck world they call it welting, but I chose to get that, and I got really fortunate because in the home deck world, guess what? They give me a 5/8 right in there. So when I go to attach this, all I'll have to do is match up my edges, and I am right there all the way around. Pretty excited about that. So remember I mentioned the Wash Away Wonder Tape? It will be your best friend, and it will. When we apply this piping, I will be using this, and I'll be just putting it right on there, peeling that piece of paper off, and then guess what it does? It will actually stick down there with no pins, and it will be a nice easy sew when we go to sew it up. So another suggestion and tip of mine, and this is actually, if you notice in your instruction sheet, when you go around right in the center here, the cording actually goes off about 1 inch or 2 and hangs off there, because you'll want your ends to kind of match up and overlap, and it will, if you can see that, it will like get swallowed up as you sew. Now that our piping is attached, we are moving on to our zippers. You will see this in steps number 8 through 9 in our instruction sheet. Here are some of my tips for doing this. Okay, now the piping is on, and we are going to move on to the first half of our zipper. The first half of both of our 2 zippers will be attaching to our front piece. right over the top of our piping. Now, with construction, with all of our pieces, there are more markings on here that we really need to remark. If you've marked them all, they've probably gotten lost. I actually mark as I go. So you want to bring back your pattern piece number 1. Now mind you, because of all the bulk and all the piping, it's not going to be exact. So when we mark our circles and our dots, we definitely need to make sure we shift to the place that we're going to be marking. The 3 main marks that you will need for this is the center mark up top, and you have 2 circle marks right on your seam allowance. Those also need to be marked. So with that, I'm going to be matching up here to mark my circle right in the middle. That's our center. Then if you notice, this isn't all the way down, and I'm going to be coming over here and making sure that this curve is all even with my pattern, and then I'll mark that circle, and then this one I shifted my pattern over here. Remember, all this is due to the bulk. It's not your flat piece that we cut out at the very beginning. So now we got our markings. Those markings are for our zipper placement. This top zipper placement, as you see, will be for where our beginning of our zipper will lay. That top zipper top. Now our zipper will be upside down, wrong side out, and we will be starting with the top zipper tape. Because if you visualize this, when we sew this on and it curves out, that will be attached to the other part of our bag, this other zipper tape. So again, if you noticed, I put my handy dandy wash away wonder tape on there. You want to match this stop with your dot. I know it's black, my piping, but this is my piping, and my zipper teeth are hanging off the edge. You want to make sure that your zipper doesn't get lost down here. It needs to be sewn on pretty much on top of your piping. Now, our 2 marks right here, I did get a 30-inch zipper, so I know I will have more length, just like my cording, to hang off the edge. You do not trim anything at this point. You keep everything there until we start assembling the bag. Okay, so with that, if you got a 28-inch zipper like it recommended, you more likely will probably be right about there. Okay? If you have extra, that is perfectly fine. You just will place that and it will hang off the edge exactly like what we did with our cording. And remember, you only sew to that dot. Don't sew it all the way up. Okay, we got 1/2 of our zipper on the front of our bag. The other half of both of our zippers will go to our top and side piece, which is pattern piece number 5. Again, you need to take out your tissue pattern. There is, and I know by now you have one big long piece, so we're going to have to flip it over and do our markings. This is the edge of one of your edges. And I'm lining up this. You have a hole right here, another circle marking that you will need to mark. Then we're going to flip it to the other side. And if you notice, my tissue pattern is upside down. And we are going to mark that. Circle marking. And we have one more in the middle. This is where it's going to get tricky because remember we cut this on the fold. If you notice right at the fold you have your center markings there. That will need to go direct center of this long pattern piece because remember we started at the center of our front of our bag and we need our zipper other half to line up. So your markings are really, really important. And if I can stress anything, at this point, if you've noticed, I don't cut corners. I don't find an easier way, especially when it comes to bag making. You pretty much want to do every little marking you can. That's another Connie tip for you. And there's our center mark. I'm bringing back our bag and we need to get one of those zippers off. It might help too, and I think I'm going to do this. My center marking is this, and I will actually mark a center on my zipper tape, so I will help match up. Alright, if you have not pulled your hair out by now, then this step you might start pulling it out. Actually, it really isn't that tough. You just have to really, really, really take your time. Now, if you noticed, of course, I'm doing a test run. I zipped up 1/2 to make sure that it's all going around. And here's my top zip, and it would do the same on the other side. So again, I cannot stress enough, you take your time with this step. Now we will jump to step number 17 in our instruction sheet, which is attaching our handles to our front and back sections. Make sure you notice the placement on your tissue pattern. I did top stitch my zipper on my side and top gusset piece. I am not doing any top stitching where my piping is. We also have to sew up and have a 5/8 seam allowance. My top stitching stops right where those dots were. So I'm able to use my 5/8 seam allowance to stitch that up. We are on our last lap to our sewing finish line, putting all of our bag pieces together, starting with our bottom piece to our top and side sections. You will see this in steps number 11 through 12 in our instruction sheet. Here are some close-ups for these steps. I marked my bottom triangles, and you will have, if you notice, it's not even, it's left over, but this is a 5/8 seam allowance that we'll be stitching to the virtual bottom. The rest of it is the zip. Obviously we want to keep it open. So next we'll be sewing 5/8 seam allowance on this side, and then on that side. Now it's time to sew up our bottom part of our bag. As you noticed, I actually zipped my top and side piece all the way around to do so. This is going to be crazy. Take it very slow, but at your 5/8 seam allowance, you'll be starting right where you ended when you first attached your zipper. You will be sewing at your 5/8 seam allowance. You will be ending right here at that mark, which was your zipper end. All the while making sure your zipper is out of the way if you have any overhang. If you notice, my piping overhang is sandwiched in between. That will all get cut off after this is all sewn properly. Now we need to put our back section onto this side of our top and side piece to the bottom. Line up your centers again, top and bottom, as well as your corners. All those are as well with your tissue pattern. You can remark your markings. So, I'll see you when our bag is all finished. How exciting! You have one finished travel bag. And I can predict that this probably will not be your last one that you will sew up. And if you're anything like me, this will be your go-to getaway bag for all your weekend travels. And as you're packing, you will have a huge smile on your face knowing that you sewed this yourself. And the fact that you now own a designer piece of luggage. Thanks, Suede!